Are you ready to learn what it takes to be a successful attorney? You're listening to Corner Office with me, Elise Powers. I'm sitting down with some of the most successful attorneys so you can learn how they made it to the top of the legal industry. You'll hear their advice for how you can forge your unique path to success. Jane, I'm so excited to have you on Corner Office. Thank you for being here.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, this is a special conversation because we know each other. We've worked together in the past. We worked together on a specific program at Polsinelli called On the Cusp, which was this really cool, unusual program that I honestly haven't seen other firms lead, that centered around taking women who are on the cusp of becoming partners at the firm on a retreat to talk about what's on their mind when they think about becoming a partner. Is this what they're looking for? Do they want to consider other paths? And really pulling back the curtain on what it means to take on that role. One of the key themes that came up in that retreat that I facilitated was, how do I balance all of the professional demands with my personal life and my family? I want to have kids. I want to be a present mother. You're a single mom of 2 adopted children. How have you built your career to this level of becoming the co-chair of the business department and having 400 professionals work with you in your practice group? How have you done that while balancing all of your personal life demands?
Balance is never easy. It's really about being present where I am present. I'm very lucky that when my girls were little, my largest client was incredibly supportive of me and us, and we negotiated is probably the wrong word. They grudgingly agreed that it would be okay that I went dark from 5:30 to 7:30 every afternoon, unless it was an emergency, in which case the emergencies trumped. But the key was having some schedule routine for the benefit of the kids when they were little, and having really open communication with my client about the fact that it was only a short time, but it was a predictable time, and they'd get me before and after if they could let me be there for my girls. The girls are now teenagers. They're 16 and 17. It's a whole lot easier to manage the logistics, but and yet we still prioritize family dinner as we did when they were 6 and 7. All of that requires an obsessive concern with my calendar and a capacity to really engage on firm things when I'm doing firm things, client things when I'm doing client things, and kid things when I'm doing kid things. And if I can just block out the noise of worrying about the things that I'm not present for, the balance kind of falls into place.
Did you ever have conversations with your kids about the responsibilities you have at work and kind of explaining the why behind you not always being able to be present?
Yeah, I think that there are several elements to that. There's a specific conversation that we've had about just my travel, which they do not like. I travel a great deal for the firm, and they wish I didn't. And I've explained that it's just part of my job, and my job is important, and they are proud of the successes I've had. It also leads to a really sort of important feminist truth for them as the children of a single woman parent. They assume that women can do anything. They are befuddled by the idea that we haven't had a woman president, but women are best at being professionals, they think. And as I speak about, balance and presence, that's key. There's a sacrifice that goes along with my working as much as I do. When it's firm work, it's about helping people that they know, because they know so many of my colleagues. We're fully integrated into Polsinelli, and it's the kind of firm Polsinelli is. One of the things I love about it is that we know each other's families. And if it's client work, the running line in the house is, this is how we get to live in our house. That somebody's got to pay the bills, and they understand that part too.
It sounds like you've been really transparent in helping them understand the why behind what you do and the times when you're not able to be there, where they have it sounds like a better idea of what your work looks like and the people you're with when you're not with them, to make it a little bit easier on them to understand your absence at times.
I think that's exactly right. And of course, there's a countervailing truth to that. They saw me practice law and be a firm leader all day, every day during the pandemic. My office doesn't have doors. So if they were walking through to go to the kitchen or to the TV room, they were walking through my office. And they came away from that having a pretty keen understanding of what it is that I do on a day-to-day basis. And they're utterly certain they don't want to be lawyers, which is a little soul-crushing, but I can live with it.
And so your dad was an attorney who
Yes.
I imagine you saw him working long hours. Did you have any hesitations in deciding you wanted to pursue that same career path, knowing what it took?
Well, it's a funny question because I very much appreciated how hard he worked, and I knew how stimulating he found the work. And he came in energized at the end of many days where he'd solved some problem that was a hard one to solve, and that sounded cool to me. But I didn't actually know what he did all day because it was a different generation. He got in the car and drove to the office. He never worked from home. That wasn't a thing. Occasionally, he would go to the Washington University Law Library to work on a Saturday, but I truly never saw him work. So when I was a senior in college, deciding not whether to go to law school, I was actually going to go, but where, and having a little crisis of conscience, I called him, and he was the least glib guy in the world, but he gave me the glibest answer he ever gave anybody. Like, I drove downtown, I talk on the phone all day, I try to help people, and then I drive home to my family. That's what I do all day. I'm like, I'm going to need a little more, Dad. And I never got it. So I went to law school and figured it out on my own.
Wow. So you really went in, like so many do who don't have lawyers as parents, in not knowing exactly what it means to be a lawyer. And thankfully it worked out for you, it sounds like.
I think that's right. I probably had a leg up because I understand sort of the rhythm of being a lawyer, the give and take of the time pressures. And I knew a lot of lawyers, and lawyers communicate outside of the law pretty consistently. So I do think that there's an advantage, which is to say I am respectful of the disadvantaged people who didn't have my advantage. That said, on the day-to-day, I had no idea. Just like any child doesn't have an idea what it is to be an adult. I mean, that's really what we're talking about.
Right. What I admire so much about you is that you have taken such intentionality in integrating your personal and professional life. And honestly, I think a big part of that is that Polsinelli has the firm culture that enables you to do that. It's not at every firm that the kids of the partners know their colleagues and are really understanding, what kind of clients their parents are working for. It's also this commitment from the firm to be very transparent about this is what is required to succeed in this role at this firm. And we're going to give you every possible resource to do that well. You still, of course, need the work ethic. And I hear you saying, I put my kids down to bed at 7:30 and then I would get back online. And that's the reality that I don't think everyone understands when they sign up for this job. How did your dad or your parents instill that work ethic in you?
I think that the work ethic actually came more from my colleagues than from my childhood. Like so many big firm lawyers, I was a good student. I mean, that's sort of table stakes to get the job in the first place. If I'm being honest, I didn't have the world's greatest work ethic. Things came pretty easy when I was a student. When I started having peers who were working as hard as I wanted to pull my weight, to do what was necessary to succeed, so that I didn't put an excessive burden on somebody with whom I was working. And that fed on itself over years and is easy when you know, like, and trust the people you work with. And that's what I think is really special about Polsinelli. We spend a lot of time and energy getting to know each other. There are an unusual number of social events and meals, and it sounds light, and it is. It's really fun, and we do know each other on a much more personal level, and we know each other's spouses and children and what have you. But there's a real intentionality around that culturally. I am much more able to ask a question, a dumb question, and of course there are dumb questions. Everybody always says there aren't, but there are, of somebody who already understands that I'm smart and hardworking and an expert in my own field, and I just don't know the answer to the question in their area of expertise. If I don't already know them, I have to do all the preliminaries. I have to do the dance, demonstrating that I'm smart and senior and, entitled to not do the work to discover the answer. It's such a convenience for the benefit of the firm, for the benefit of the client, for the benefit of our families, that we take the time to really to know each other. And when we know each other, we make kind decisions on the other's behalf because we can have a genuinely empathetic reaction to challenges that our colleagues encounter.
It sounds like your work ethic stems from a desire to be reliable to your colleagues because you know and like your colleagues, and almost like I want to be a good friend to my friends. When you care about someone and you understand the impact to them if you don't follow through, that's really what is driving your work ethic.
I think that's exactly right. I really do.
And what I've noticed, I've been so fortunate to lead your first year associate programming, your new partner retreats. I mean, even the new partner orientation, the firm flies everyone to Los Angeles, puts them up in the Mayborn Hotel, Beverly Hills, which is the nicest hotel that I have ever stayed in. I remember the first year we did this, I didn't have a working shower, and I still said it was the best hotel experience I've ever been in. They rent out a Michelin star restaurant for dinner and all of these things. While you might think, wow, what an extravagance. What's the point? The point is you're bringing people together for special milestones in their career so they can have these experiences together and build rapport and build trust. And then, yes, you go back and you work long hours, but it's more worth it because you've developed such trusted camaraderie with your peers.
I think that's right, and those events create both lateral, really strong connections. Those who are promoted at the same time, for example, for the first year partner retreat, they have a sense of being a class. For a class of first year associates is enormous. By the time it winnows up to those who are promoted, it's a much smaller group. They may or may not know each other already, but after that retreat, they sure do. They also, by virtue of going to a retreat like that, develop a strong relationship with leadership. Firm leaders attend those events, and it's really important to have that communication in a really informal setting because that's where we learn things. You ask a direct question about a policy matter, you're much more likely to get a canned answer, the expected predictable answer. Ask the same question, over a glass of wine and a really good steak, you're more likely to get a fulsome answer. Maybe it's the same, but it's going to be more casual, informed, and help us make better decisions about how to lead the firm.
Right. And, as we talk about, the fancy Beverly Hills hotel and going out to steak dinners, this also brings up the privilege of being able to lead a nice lifestyle when you work this hard. There is a payoff to it. So when you think about, for you personally, what makes the hard work worth it? Is it money? Is it accolades? Is it power? Like, what drives you? And even how has that definition of success evolved over time?
That's a really interesting question. It's one that I've given a fair amount of thought to because I have to kind of test it is this worth it for me? Is this worth it for the downside to my kids? And the answer consistently is yes, for a couple of reasons. I've been really busy the last few days working on a very large transaction, and it reminds me that I absolutely love what I do. That's part of the drive, the constant intellectual challenge, the management of 1,000 moving pieces. I love that. And it's important to remember that that's really a foundational element to any ambition. It's really hard to get up and go do a job that you find tiresome day after day after day for 35 years. Within the context of doing a job that I love, I'm not unselfish enough to not want to be, recognized. Part of that recognition is money, but at some point, and this is such the rare air of a firm like Polsinelli, every single lawyer who works at Polsinelli makes plenty of money. From a first year is well compensated for a first year, a very senior partner is compensated very well for a very senior partner. It then becomes about sort of relativity. And we are so cautious about not using compensation as a weapon. It's a reward, never a weapon. And that's a really healthy attitude. I make as much as I could possibly want. I don't care about money anymore. That's a remarkable luxury. I mean, few people in the world can say that. That's wonderful. So then ambition has to come from something else. It's not about, another $10,000 or whatever. For me, it's about being able to make a contribution back to the people that motivated me to become the lawyer that I am and aspire to be. And I like having the capacity to influence the outcome. At some level, it's power, which is a weird word. But I started, my early career was working for an elected official, and it really was, I was respectful then of the decision made by so many who sought elected office back in the day before everything got super ugly. They were willing to relinquish money in favor of power. They could impact an outcome. I have had this magical career path where I got to achieve power within my own ambit and still got money. I mean, I kind of think that's what success looks like.
It's what most people could only hope for. And, what I hear you saying is without a real enjoyment of the work, a love of the work even, the money isn't going to do it. It's not going to be enough to commit the time and energy to being excellent at this work. And that's honestly when I talk to first years at these big firms who are so unhappy. Within a couple months, we're talking and they're saying, wow, I loved the job offer I got, the compensation package, and I can already tell you it's not worth it. I'm miserable and I don't want to be miserable every day. And that realization is really hard when you envision your life going down a certain path and you say, no, I'm not going to do this. I need to figure out something else.
I think that's absolutely right. This is not a job for everybody. We talk about that with our first years in the business department with some regularity. Of those who love it, you couldn't ask for a better job. Incredibly flexible hours, high compensation, smart colleagues, a wonderful filter from the people who you don't want to have to sort of explain basics to because we're expensive, which is kind of spectacular. What a great model. We only get to talk to smart people all day, every day. That's the law generally. That's big law generally. And then kind of filtering into Polsinelli specifically, I used the phrase earlier, we know, like, and trust each other. That's remarkable. That's something that is really special to this place. And if there's a passion for the work and the place that you're doing it is supportive and familiar, it's a pretty remarkably nice lifestyle. If there's not a passion for the work, and that even happens occasionally here with our young lawyers, they sounded like a good idea, but they just plain don't like the work. Okay, it's a really flexible degree. There are lots of other terrific things you can do with it as over the course of years that, as I said earlier, that the big first year class winnows down to a much smaller shareholder class. That's kind of what success looks like. It's okay for people to sample, learn something. There's no better place to learn the blocking and tackling of legal practice than a big law firm, and then go off to do something else. At a client, at a boutique kind of firm, with the government. What a wonderful credential to be able to do so many different things.
So if you were to talk to law students, they know they want to go into law, but how do they figure out what they're going to love? How do you make an educated guess and informed decision on maybe your practice area or firm size so that they don't find themselves in the position of some of those first years saying, wow, this is not what I thought it would be, or this is just not for me?
It is challenging for the law student to see the full horizon. I think law schools, particularly sort of the elite law schools, do a terrific job of creating opportunities for exposure. One thing that I've noted, and that it's a very, very small sample, so I may be mistaken in the larger scale, but I went to Washington University Law School here in St. Louis, and I did a Women Law Association speed dating event. The idea was women law students could meet with a ton of practitioners and just get a sample. What's it like to be a judge? What's it like to work for a government agency? What's it like to hang out a shingle? Really interesting exposure, and hopefully create some connections that would lead to some follow-up and create some mentorship opportunities. I thought it was a great idea. What I was struck by was how underrepresented big law was. And there's a narrative that attaches far too often, particularly among women law students, that big law generally, and it's not specific to Polsinelli, but any large law firm is a sweatshop where you have to make a decision about whether you're going to have a family before you could possibly know whether you want to have a family. I reject that. I think that big law is a great place for having a family for all the reasons I said before. You got flexibility, you got money. This is not a bad lifestyle choice for a lawyer who wants to have a family. But if the narrative is conveyed to first-year law students that it's a bad idea, it's hard to interrupt that. So I've tried to interrupt the conversation by just being present and getting my colleagues to show up for the events like that too. Let's make sure that law students understand that this is a really interesting opportunity for them to explore. May not be the right selection for everybody, but more often than I used to, I look at things through sort of a gender lens. I led our firm's Women's Empowerment Committee for a number of years, and it became enough of my day job that I've now kind of adopted it. I care more deeply about the narrative of made available to women law students than I do to law students generally. And so that's where I'm trying to put my thumb on the scale.
And I think it can't be overstated how helpful it is to have the flexibility of being an attorney where, yes, you might work late at night, but you also can sign off at 4 p.m. to get to your kid's soccer game. And what I dislike so much is this rigid definition of work-life balance. It's I work 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Anything beyond that is asking way too much. It's work-life integration, and that is what is afforded to you when you are in a position at a big law firm like this where you're trusted, get your work done. Obviously, you have to be available during working hours, but we want to create an environment where you can do it all.
I think that's very true. I have a close friend who's a senior lawyer in-house at a big public company. She too is a single parent of adopted children, and it drove her crazy that she really had to be there between 9 and 5. And she's a very successful and senior lawyer. I was out yesterday afternoon. My kids are 16 and 17, and yet I still have to take my 16-year-old to the pediatrician for her annual. I don't have to tell anybody. I just go to the doctor. And that is, and I was I'm working on a large deal. I was on the phone and on my computer late last night. I don't feel like that was a sacrifice at all. I feel like that was easy, flexible, genuine work-life balance.
Yep. So I want to understand your role specifically as the co-chair of the business department. It's not often that we get to hear from people in this level of a firm, of this level of power, to understand what it really means to be in that position. So now that you are the co-chair of the business department and not, a standard shareholder, not that being a shareholder is standard, what is it that you're thinking about in this role that other shareholders probably don't have on their radar?
I think each shareholder takes responsibility and pride in developing his or her own book of business and providing terrific client service. And hopefully they're building a team of lawyers around them that is becoming better trained and it's very much a mentorship profession. And so you adopt a team on a consistent basis to meet whatever needs your clients are going to have. And your team grows up and you have to replenish from the bottom, and it's a constant cycle, and it's fairly narrow. As I've risen in leadership positions, I'm looking at other people's teams. I'm invested in other people's careers. I want to make sure that our terrific high quality lawyers are getting the work that they need to continue to develop their skills and to meet client need. And to the extent that there's some need for remediation, I want to pour into the people we've invested so much in. For an individual shareholder, if somebody doesn't work out, you can kind of throw him or her back into the pond and just fish again. If you're looking at it on a more holistic basis, those who have been thrown back in need to be remediated. Do they just need to find somebody with whom they jive better? Fantastic. Best idea in the world. Let's see how we can do that. Is there a real substantive problem that can be educated past? Let's do that. And sometimes it's helping somebody find a different career opportunity if it's the wrong fit altogether. Taking full responsibility for the careers of 400 people, which I do with my co-chair, I'm incredibly lucky to have somebody that I'm constantly bouncing ideas off of, and he's constantly bouncing ideas off of me. So we don't get overwhelmed and make a quick decision that isn't fully thought through, which can happen in a position of the scale. We want to maximize revenue. We want to maximize opportunity for our clients. We want to maximize opportunities for our colleagues. And in order to do that, we're forever scanning the horizon. How can we attract bigger, better clients institutionally? How do we work with marketing to enhance our brand recognition as the best middle market M&A firm in the country? Because we are the best middle market M&A firm in the country, both for private equity clients and for strategic buyers and sellers. This is a great thing to hone in on. That also creates opportunities for our associates to get really good at being lawyers, and for our partners to be able to be terrific lawyers and attract more opportunity to kind of keep everybody's plates full. But it's really a function of widening the lens, and widening the lens is really satisfying.
Jane, as you're talking, I'm thinking, how do you do it all? In preparation for this podcast, I sent you a very non-urgent email of, can you review this document? And here are some questions to look at in advance. Within 5 minutes, you had signed the document. You had answered the questions. You're responsible for the careers of 400 people. You have clients calling you. You're on deals. Like, how do you do it? Are there any habits that you have that equip you specifically to be able to juggle all of these things and to be so on top of it?
You're very nice to say all of that. The reality is you get a response in like 2 minutes or 3 days. I try very hard to stay on top of my email because I don't want to be a bottleneck for somebody else's capacity to continue to do work. I am an effective delegator, and I have an amazingly talented and committed team of lawyers with whom I've worked for their whole careers. And we happen to be really busy right now. And that's, a pure blessing. There's no curse element to it. But I have to kind of expand out, and I'm working with more and more Polsinelli lawyers. These cultural elements that I spoke of earlier matter immensely. I know these people. I like them. I know their work. I know that they're talented. They're willing to pour themselves in. I'm working with a partner right now who consistently over the last week has been sending me emails at 2:00 in the morning. That freaks me out a little for him. But it also tells me that he's willing to do absolutely anything to get the deal done, and that when this deal signs, which it will in a couple of days, he's going to need a little time to be with his family. And that's great. That's appropriate. Deal teams expand. I'd rather have more people working on it and work harder myself to coordinate than overburden anybody, which could compromise quality. I don't want to overburden anybody because I care about them, but I also don't want to overburden anybody because I don't want to ever give anything other than absolutely A+ quality work product to my client. And so the coordination is hard. I obsess over my calendar. I can't tell you how many times a day I look at my calendar, because I can look at my calendar and say, hey, I've got 2 free hours. This isn't going to be too overwhelming. I've got 2 whole free hours today to do actual work and clear emails. And then I clear emails before I go to bed at night. I clear emails that came in overnight from my bed in the morning. I'm committed to not being a bottleneck, but that doesn't mean that I can give a substantive reply every single time. What I can do is figure out when I'm going to be able to give the substantive reply, tie it back to my calendar, and live in a pretty contained world. And I prioritize some family things too, using that same calendar technique. And I block out, last night I had water aerobics. I know that's boring and sounds like I'm super old. It's boring and I'm super old, but I didn't miss it. I'm super busy, but I didn't miss water aerobics. That's the balance. And as long as it's on my calendar, I'm going to honor it unless I absolutely can't. And the saving grace in all of that is that things fall off the calendar. It's much more unusual, because I'm so scheduled, for something to get put on at the last minute than for something to fall off at the last minute. And that's how I'm able to find the time to do all the things that I have to do.
It sounds like you're not someone who's just on autopilot going through the motions. You are calculated in not just how you devote your time, but your attention. And there's a real ability to prioritize and also some structure. You said I clear my inbox at night. You're checking it in the morning before you're even out of bed. Does it ever get exhausted? Do you ever just want to sit on the couch for a couple hours and turn off your phone?
Yes, and I do. I mean, we have couples nights, and I don't on date night the phone doesn't come out. That's useful. I am really transparent about the specifics of my personal demands with my clients. That might be not universally appealing. I can see in a much more formal client relationship that would be awkward. It would be inauthentic for me to be in that kind of formal client relationship. And it became a running joke last weekend when my team was working really hard over a holiday weekend that I'd be there and I'd be working really hard right alongside them. It doesn't matter that I'm old and senior. I am, shoulder to shoulder with them, except on Sunday afternoon when I had to take my daughter to Raging Rivers, the water park, for her birthday party. It's a goofy, silly thing that a real human being has to do because, being a parent comes first. And if anybody objects to my being a parent, we have a very different conversation. I mean, it's foundational.
Yeah. I think you have been so authentic and transparent in what is important to you that it builds a lot of trust with your clients and colleagues, because there's no guessing. There's no mystery of, is Jane invested? Is she reliable? We know she is. We also understand all the other things on her plate. So you've done a really nice job having those conversations in a way that builds trust. So in addition to everything on your plate, you're also responsible to thinking about compensation. And this is such a black box for attorneys at all levels. I'm amazed how few senior associates, when they are really thinking through, do I want to pursue becoming a partner at our firm? They don't even understand what the compensation would be if they decided to do that. So I'd love for you to just take us into a compensation committee meeting. And maybe we even start with, how is it decided who gets on the compensation committee for a firm?
Well, I can only speak to this firm. And the specifics of what happens in the comp room stays in the comp room. But the general is a really fair and transparent system. First, the leaders of the departments are permanently on the comp committee, and we are responsible for knowing about the careers of the people in our departments. We need to know who's had a baby, who got divorced, who lost a parent. who lost a client or who gained a client. This may look like a blip. This year's performance may look like a blip, but it isn't. It's something that's, there's been a sea change to the positive in an individual lawyer's career. That's our job to know that, and we work very, very hard to acquire that information. But we also have probably an equal number of members of the committee who are appointed by the firm's chairman. It serves two purposes. It rounds out the committee, gives some geographic perspective, gives a broader sort of reputational perspective, while we, the department chairs, are very careful to try to learn as much as we can. We're also pretty senior, and so sometimes information doesn't make its way to us. And having people that are out there in the firm observing add some real perspective. Also, the people who are on the committee inevitably are strong practitioners, and strong practitioners tend to work with large numbers of people, and so you just expand the capacity to bring that perspective into the room. The committee is informed by recommendations that come from both the department level and the firm level. Each department in our recent history has had its own smaller committee to acquire information, sort of sort through recommendations, and then the firm recommendations come through the CEO and the CFO of the firm and are well informed by a lot of qualitative information, but also a careful smoothing of some of the quantitative so that there aren't weird outliers depending on the practice area of the individual lawyer. So methodologically, it's a very qualitative process. We really try to contextualize each individual lawyer's performance, but the quantitative has to be really important as well. We as a firm value both origination, creating opportunity for work to be done in the firm, and production. We are a firm of working lawyers, and we want everybody to know that the harder they work, the more revenue that they generate, the more likely it is that they will be more highly compensated. It's pretty easy math. This is not controversial, but it's remarkable, to your point, how few of our lawyers are thinking about the economic impact of the work they do. The metric that they track is hours. Everybody knows their own hours because they're tracking against a standard. That's right and appropriate and table stakes. But seeing how those hours convert to money is part of maturing as an owner of the firm. And then once a lawyer is senior enough to be promoted to shareholder, shareholders are well compensated, as are associates. As I said earlier, no one around here suffers. But understanding that somebody who's able to command premium rate work in a coastal office creates more revenue for the firm and is therefore more likely to be paid more than somebody who is in a rate challenge practice in a rate challenge market. That's okay, though, because you know who you are, you know what your rate is, you know what you're commanding in the marketplace, and so the compensation sort of follow through makes sense. It feels fair. And we are a transparent firm. We ultimately convey to all of our partners what each of our partners makes and the key data points that inform those decisions. That's important. That's valuable information because it breaks down sort of the mythologizing of people who are in the club getting paid more. That's just not true at this firm. There's no club. There's no inner circle. We are evaluating data and contribution in context. Recognize, too, that contribution is a huge plus and minus factor. If you're a leader of anything that is of value to the firm, including just being a really terrific firm citizen, being present in an office, mentoring associates, very informal, but those who are more culturally contributory are subject to that qualitative plus factor. And those who are silos who work in their basements and never talk to another person may create real revenue. They get paid, but they don't get that plus factor.
So it sounds like a very comprehensive, holistic evaluation of an individual. I can't imagine how much time is spent considering Did they have a death in the family? Did they have a child this year? Well, that impacted their hours. How much are they investing in mentoring or representing the firm? How much are they billing? Where do they live? What are their rates? So if you had to say, like, is it more qualitative or quantitative, the analysis on compensation?
The quantitative is the easy first run. The qualitative is where fairness happens. And you can't do one without the other.
Got it. And if you think about people who are considering becoming a partner, what is it that they get wrong about what's so important? Are they overvaluing certain things and underestimating the importance of other things?
I think there are two key things that I took away from that Women on the Cusp retreat that you and I attended a couple of years ago. There's great fear that that their steady stream of work will be shut off because whoever's sending it to them can't have two partners in the file. That is not a well-established concern or appropriate concern in our transactional practices. I think that might be more fair and legitimate in some of our litigation practices. So I want to be careful about broad generalities, firm-wide, but it's something that's well worth considering. Will you be able to stay busy, and are there new opportunities that you can access as a partner? Those are the balancing kind of first tier considerations. In the business department generally, that's something that can be easily disposed of. It is not materially more expensive to use a first year partner than an 8th year associate. Certainly not more expensive to use a first year partner than a counsel who would be at the same rate. And we don't have the same, generally speaking, the same concerns about having too many partners on a file. The next concern that many come into the partnership promotion process worried about is whether they can develop business on their own. At this firm, and I can't say it enough, and nobody believes me when I say it internally except the people who do, and it takes about 5 million times saying it, you can be promoted without having a lick of business, and that is not a bad thing. Some people will develop business, and some people have that ambition, and some people bring the skills to the table. More people develop that skill over the course of the next decade than think they're going to, but not everybody does. There's a long, happy career here for service partners who are not developing business, but who are great at what they do and who work really hard. It's actually one of the great market differentiators for us, because where you might get, a mid-level associate from a different larger firm running a deal, you're going to get a 15-year experienced partner at this firm. How is that not better? Of course it is. You get the experience of a terrific, well-trained lawyer with tons of market experience going up against somebody with a decade's less. I can lean into that and sell it all day long if you're not somebody who wants to sell work. More and more people determine that they can. But what I was really struck by at that meeting was fear of those two key considerations. Will I still be busy? Good question. Figure it out. Ask specifically. Don't guess. And rumination and speculation is the enemy of any really smart person. We can do it for forever. That's the nature of being a smart person. Being disciplined enough to identify the question, ask it, and believe the answer is crucial. And then the business development concern is misplaced, but incredibly present.
Mm-hmm. How comforting for people to know that you can be successful in your own way. You don't have to fit this mold that I think is often talked about, and you have to be a rainmaker in order to make partner. That's not how it works, at least at Polsinelli. So I want to wrap up with, at the end of our Women on the Cusp program that we did together, I'll never forget when we collected feedback. One of the participants ended with, "Jane Arnold is a force and I want to be her." I'm sure there are a lot of people listening to this thinking, I want a career like Jane's. If you had to give one piece of advice to a more junior attorney who wants to rise to the top of their firm, what would it be?
Be flexible. I was absolutely certain that I knew what my whole life was going to look like when I was about 23 years old. There is not one single element of that certain path that panned out, and what actually happened is vastly better.
I love that. Well, Jane, you are a force. I'm so grateful for our conversation. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Elise. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to Corner Office with me, Elise Powers. Be sure to follow me on LinkedIn for weekly tips on how to accelerate your career. If you're loving this podcast, I would be so grateful if you'd click follow on your favorite listening platform. While you're there, give us a 5-star rating. If you're interested in having me speak at your organization, or if you have topics you'd like us to cover on the podcast, send me a note at info@eleviewconsulting.com. That's info@ELEVIEW consulting.com. All opinions expressed by Elise and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Eleview Consulting or any law firm. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as legal advice or the basis for legal decisions.